Hello everyone. I can see comments coming in. Well, let's get started. We are all here. I have all my three young panelists with me. I'm going to introduce all of them, of course. The topic that we are going to discuss today is the homeschooling experience. So, everyone, all the parents and students and teachers are in a way experiencing the homeschooling environment, though in a forced way, but yes, everyone is experiencing this. And we thought it is a good idea to have, students who've been homeschooled and are into their respective careers or are studying further and hear it from them that what an experience it is when you've been homeschooled. So I have three of them. I'm going to start with Anand. Anand Jani is a student of philosophy, history, and music with interests in literature and films. He's been working as an assistant writer at Studio Olymping. Oh, I didn't get that. Olympingus.
Solemn.
Okay. Am I pronouncing that correctly, Anand?
That's
I
right,
mean,
yes.
excuse me if I'm not.
That's right.
He's currently, Anand is pursuing his BA honors at Ahmedabad University. Anand has been homeschooled from grade 7 onwards. Just to give you a quick background, Anand's mother has been a teacher, she's still a teacher, and father is an architect. So, Anand has spent a good amount of years in being homeschooled, and he's going to share his experiences with us. Welcome, Anand.
Thank you.
Next is Megha. Megha has been homeschooled from ninth grade onwards, and she's had her early interests in classical, semi classical, and music and dance. And she has been training in music in the Guru Shishya Parampara with Dr. Ashwini Bide Deshpande for the last 3.5 years in Mumbai, and is also has been getting her advanced training in Bharatnatyam. That's interesting, Megha. From Sri Vaibhav Arekarji in Mumbai for the last 4 years. She's, as I mentioned, has been homeschooled for over 4 to 5 years, and she has her own journey of being homeschooled and what she has come across. And we look forward to hear a lot of it from you, Megha, today. Welcome on the panel.
Thank you. Thank you.
Last, but as I've been calling her the senior most on the panel, not, I mean, because she's been homeschooled throughout and a very interesting journey she's had. Nirupama, Raghavan, I'd call you Nero. So, Nero has been homeschooled by her parents, Aruna ma'am and Raghavan sir. Just for the audience who are listening to us, these two names for people in Vapi and around have been very familiar. They've been the founders of Quadsic methodology, and that has been translated into a full-fledged school in the name of Lumens in Vapi. And Nero has been the experiment that has led to this Quadsic, I would say, or the other way around. I hope you agree to me, Nero.
I'm a
So,
guinea pig.
Neeru has been homeschooled all the way, and she's done her degree in English from the English department from University of Calgary, Canada. At 16, she's translated the Kalki Parthiban Kanavu, which is an historical novel in Tamil. She currently lives in, currently she's in Canada, and a special thanks to Neeru for joining us. It's quite early there. We got to know while we were interacting. It's like 4:30 a.m. there. So Neeru, thank you for joining us,
No problem.
and I'm sure this is a topic of interest for you. And of course, we are expecting that you're going to bring in a lot of your experience and help parents and teachers who are watching us live to understand what homeschool journey is like. Of course, I'm going to mention some bit of what Neeru has been doing, and she's done while she was being homeschooled. She finished reading a lot of novels by the age of 4 and 8. She started reading a lot. I also get to know that she wrote a storybook. Nero, if you could help me with the title, what was that
Power and
storybook?
cover.
Yes, Power and Kavi at the age of 8. That's when Nero wrote this storybook, which was published by Indian Express. And she's also one of the youngest authors in India. So that's great to have you, Nero. And we look forward to learn a lot about homeschooling and your journey today. Welcome to the panel. So we are all set. I still see the comments flowing in from the YouTube page, the channel, and Facebook. I'm going to start with a question to you, Anand. And the question is, how did the whole idea of not going to school excite you? I mean, did it excite you? You were in grade 7. I mean, that's how I understand that at that age, probably school is something that maybe I don't want to go to school is something that comes very naturally. So when you this decision was taken and it was decided that you're going to be homeschooled, what were the thoughts? I mean, did it excite you? No more school from tomorrow or next year. I mean, how did it go?
Well, yes, it definitely excited me. But I mean, I have to say, I loved my school because it was a new school, and we were only 5 students in the class, and I loved my team, my class members as well. But the idea of homeschooling, and I have to say that homeschooling was a collective decision. It was not just a parent's decision. And
Okay.
then they said that hey, you should homeschool. No, they asked me what I thought about it, and I agreed to it. And the way I understood homeschooling to be full of field trips and full of new stuff and full of free time to pursue what I wanted. I really thought that would be exciting. I loved school. I have to clarify that. I entirely loved my school, but I also thought this was a new way of approaching things, approaching life. So it did excite me a lot.
Right. Thank you for that, Anand. I'm going to come to you, Megha. My question to you is, or probably, I'm going to put this across for all of you now. And starting with Megha, if you all could answer this, what are the major benefits of being homeschooled? If you could give me like maybe 2 or 3 points, what are the major benefits of being homeschooled? We start with Megha and then move on to Niru. Yeah, Megha.
The first and foremost, can you hear me right?
Yeah,
Or is it still feeble?
better now. It can be a bit louder.
Okay, okay. The first and foremost, I would say, is time. Okay, lot of
Okay.
time on your hand when you are homeschooling, and
Okay.
because of that time and space, the breathing space that
Mhm.
your mind gets to
Okay.
think about things and think about what you have been studying, what you want to do while you are at home, how you want to pursue your academics, and anything else that you want to pursue along with academics. So the fact that you get so much time, you slow down. Okay, it's a very
Okay.
important pause, and it is much needed, because the system wherein in traditional schooling, it's usually like, it's like a lull, one after the other. You keep going, you keep going, you keep going, and it's also very result oriented. So
Mhm.
when you get so much time to think about how you will be doing your homeschooling at home, you
Right.
discover a lot of things about yourself, something that
Mhm.
you don't uh, uh, and when you come across those, when you look inside and when you see that, oh, these are the things I'm also interested in, or I would like to know more about these things,
Mhm.
you surprise yourself, because
Right.
you've never got the time to think about it. So time and space is, I think, one of the major benefits. And all of that leads to a lot of other things, like your approach towards anything that you pursue, eventually it changes.
Right.
The way you look at things, the way you look at anything, not just a subject or a topic, but
Okay.
the entire thought process changes eventually. So I
Okay.
think that is one. And personally, I would say, I, like you already mentioned in my introduction, that I've always been very serious about the two art forms that you mentioned, Indian classical and
Right.
dance, Indian
Right.
classical dance and music. I'm sorry. And music has been in my blood. Both my parents are musicians, so music has never been a separate subject for me. Since
Right.
I started talking, I started singing, I can say. So it's always been with me, and it's been part of my academics and everything. So was dance. I loved dancing since I was very young, and I started pursuing it as a hobby. But very early in life, I also realized I want to do it very seriously. And I also knew
Okay.
I wanted to take up performing arts further. I wouldn't say as a career, but I would
Right.
want to take it up seriously. So again, we come to time. It gave me a lot of time to
So yeah, I think the point that you
devote.
say is it gives you a lot of time to think. It has given you a lot of time to pursue your interests and get more focused and more intense in the efforts that you have to make for what you like,
And
rather than
also
getting doing it.
balance. Yeah,
Balance.
and find the balance between everything. Yeah.
Great. Thank you. Yeah, Niru, back to you. If you could tell all of us that how has homeschooling benefited.
I think the primary thing is that it's given me a lot of ability to organize myself and discipline myself, because when you're homeschooling, right, there's a lot of opportunity to get off track if you're not organized and thoughtful about how you manage your day, your week, your month, right?
Yeah.
And so what I found was that it gave me a real ability to focus in and say, okay, how do I need to work in a way that makes sense? How do I think about, even before starting on a subject, you're looking ahead, as Megha said, to the next thing and the next thing, and you're more thoughtful and and creative about it, but also disciplined. I found, for instance, the transition to post secondary was very easy for me because it was already a habit for me that, oh, well, you just have to read so many books at home. You just have to work on things. You just have to do riyas. It's not, it's not something that you need to, you don't need to cultivate responsibility as an adult. You already had it instilled in you as a child.
So, Niru, just to dig this further on what you just said before I move on to the next question, there's one general fear or dilemma that I see in parents when we talk of homeschool is that the child might not get in sync with the routine, will not get habituated to follow a certain routine or a discipline. While what you just mentioned is that you became more disciplined and you were more self-started,
Yeah.
right? So could you help us understand more on how did the homeschooling pattern or the whole schedule help you become more self-started or more self-disciplined?
Right. There were a few things, right? So, for one, my parents were very clear that when I was in school, so to speak, even if it was at home, it was a schooling space. I was not allowed to mess around, right? I had to be focused when I was in class. But
So
I had a lot of
could you
freedom
do
to
that
determine
for
when those class hours would be.
yeah, so for the audience to understand, could you help them understand how this transition happened? I've heard of this a bit earlier from your parents, but I'm sure people would be interested to understand this.
So, my parents had always intended to homeschool me for a while, right? And
Yeah.
they were thinking essentially up to primary school, and they also started a school at the same time. When I was 6, they founded a school in rural South India, right?
Okay.
And so they were balancing teaching me with teaching other students who were younger, and so there was a level of how do I put this? They were I was both in I had they worked their homeschooling around their careers, right? So maybe
Okay.
my class hours were 5 a.m. to 8 a.m., and so you see why I'm not bothered about being awake at 5:30. And so maybe it was 5 a.m. to 8 a.m. and then 7 p.m. to 9 p.m. my classes, and in between I was doing what you would call homework and so on, right? So it was an interesting and constantly shifting scenario, but I think that prepares you more for a work or post secondary environment, because
Right.
I mean, really, how many interesting careers actually work on on a 9 to 5, uh, everything is always the same basis? Not many.
Right.
Even in an office job, your tasks are constantly shifting, and so I think it prepared me very well in that sense.
Right.
Does that answer the question?
Yeah, and I would also like to add on to this. Like, I've heard of this. You can correct me if I'm wrong. That so there's this place where you are supposed to be, conducting your class. That's a room. So for a moment, when the schedule is about to start, your mom will become your teacher, and then you're supposed to talk to her like a teacher. And that space where you were playing like 5 minutes before has become your classroom now. So now you to get into that mode of schooling,
Yeah,
and as if you are in your classroom with your teacher. So I
yeah,
think that also
absolutely.
adds on to the bit of self-disciplining yourself
It does.
and carrying on the routine. I think the next question to you, Anand, is that can you help us understand what's the best thing that happened to you in your homeschool journey?
Yeah, there have been many best things that happened, but I think the most interesting thing, or the experience that I uh, take across the most is, um, because I already had a base in schooling, in formal schooling, before I moved on to homeschooling, and I already had exposure to certain set fields of subjects. So you had biology, you had physics. I knew that what these are and how these are taught in school. I
Right.
think what homeschooling journey allowed me to do is it allowed me to make these connections between all these fields that I already knew existed in very concrete and very blinkered terms. And then I realized, oh, okay, they are not very disparate, they are not very discrete fields by themselves. They're actually pretty interconnected. So
Right.
that interdisciplinariness is actually what I found to be the most useful in homeschooling, and that simply happens because you're reading so much, you're spending so much time engaging with activities you would not otherwise have engaged in, and I think most fundamentally, homeschooling teaches you to be more curious than you are when you're in school, because you have more space, you have more freedom to ask questions, and you're asking questions about things you like, but you're also asking questions about things you don't like. So that kind of chaos helps you a lot in forming connections that you would not otherwise have seen.
Yeah,
Right.
So I'd say that is possibly the most important
Great. So I think
fundamental.
what I liked about what Anand just mentioned is that homeschooling helped create a kind of chaos, and that chaos helped ask questions and think about things which otherwise in a routine or a set pattern as a student or as a child you are not able to ask, or probably you don't think in that direction. So
Exactly.
I think asking the right questions, not necessarily that you find answers or there's someone always there to give you answers, but the moment your brain is getting trained to ask the right questions, eventually you are supposed to go ahead and find the answers. Either someone is going to give you those answers, or you're yourself going to find answers. I think that's an interesting point you're making, Anand. I also leave
Yeah.
it to you, Megha and Niru, that if you could share what interesting happened with you in your homeschool journey. Of course, Megha, you mentioned about the time bit that you
Yeah.
got all of the time. Apart from that, if you want to add on something that you credit to the homeschooling, that was something good that happened to you.
Yes, I would like to mention that it would be similar to what Anand just said. When we
Hmm.
talk about integrated learning, this is
Yeah.
something we have discovered in the process. Also, the chaos I think is very important, because even I moved suddenly into this different type of schooling. So I
Right.
spent most of my schooling years in a regular school,
Right.
so that base was already there. And now when you start studying yourself, when you start looking at things and subjects that you like and don't like, when you start
Hmm.
questioning those things, uh,
Right.
there is a lot of chaos, and that chaos helps you discipline yourself. Discipline in sense of routine, in sense of work ethics, and in sense of thought process. So
Okay.
whether it be music and dance for me as extra activities, or I wouldn't say extra activities, or as separate interests other than academics, all of it was always one for me. So it's not like a scheduled routine that you pursue this particular thing for so many hours and this for so many hours. That
Right.
schedule doesn't really make sense, and it should not, because once you are given that freedom, you make the best of it, sometimes by doing nothing, sometimes by doing something that's definitely not related to your interest, and you discover things about yourself. Like I said before,
Right.
I found out that I am interested in photography, or in bird watching, or in butterflies. These are very
Okay.
little things, but I wouldn't have realized if I didn't ask questions. Yeah. So connecting things is broad, to
Great.
think about everything in a broad way. Yeah.
And
Sure.
the other
Sure.
advantage that it has.
Nero, you would like to add something to this?
Yeah, the other adding to what Megha said, the other advantage also that I would like to talk about is you can reorganize large chunks of time to give your child. I'm speaking as if to parents here. You can reorganize your time as to give your child the ability to
Sure.
do things that may not be possible for somebody who is in a Monday to Friday schooling environment, right? Like for instance, when I was 11, I said I had an interest in learning philosophy and Sanskrit. So I actually attended a
Mhm.
3-month workshop on Advaita and Sanskrit and chanting and philosophy in general at an ashram, right? And
Right.
so we spent the 6 months before that working like mad. We got all the sort of curriculum stuff out of the way, and then I had those 3 months clear to do that. And it was January to April. No,
Okay.
no child in a school could have managed it. I was the youngest person there by 40 years,
Hmm.
but I had the time and ability to indulge that and still keep up with my classes because I had the ability to just say, okay, the whole day is open. If I want to do something in January, I can plan for it in June and just go.
Right. Great.
So,
Great. So this brings up the next question, and probably if Nero, if you could answer this, what would a regular week look like
uh,
when you're being homeschooled?
it changed from when I was little to when I was older and a teenager, right? So when I was little, it looked more like formal classes with my mother, where I was very much sit down, learn about things, practice things, and so on. And I was very hyper. I was a little ADHD as a kid, so sometimes I'd have to say. Do my lessons while running round and round in the room. My poor mother sat on a stool and turned around to face me the whole time. As I got older, though, it began to look more like they gave me more responsibility and control over my learning. So we'd sit down every 6 months and have a talk about, okay, what do we need to learn for the next 6 months? What sort of standard? What does everybody your age generally know? What are you interested in knowing? And what are you just curious about? Right, so
Right.
then my mother would look at uh, whether she or my father was better equipped to teach it, and then that would be the next 6 months curriculum. And I had more and more control over that growing up, so eventually it looked more like I'd read a book and then come back and say, okay, here are my thoughts. What's the historical context? What's the literary context? That was how
Right.
it looked for
Right.
me.
Great. Mega, how would your regular week look like while you were being homeschooled?
So initially, there was no regularity, because
Okay.
out of that chaos, you are trying to find a rhythm. Okay,
So were
and
you
to
enjoying this no school initially, and therefore there was no regularity? Were you kind of relaxed?
so it's not about relaxation or enjoyment. It's about
Mhm.
trying to understand what situation you are in, and not,
Okay.
in fact, it is very uncomfortable in the beginning. Uncomfortable not in a negative way, but it creates a zone in which you, again, I would say, you start questioning it. You start questioning almost everything, and not
Okay.
in terms of how will I cover all my studies, or how in the next 6 months what all should I be studying and not studying, and when should I appear for my board exams and so forth. Not these questions, but how would I approach it. To understand that, it takes time, and therefore I wouldn't say there was a routine, but I would say that there was certain things I would make sure would happen. not just myself but also my parents. So be it my practice of both the art forms, be it my academics, but it is definitely not, it doesn't make sense to have a fixed schedule, because it's also the same thing, just as school.
So,
To
so
do
Megha,
this.
tell me what was that minimal to do for every day? What were those two or three things that would happen every day?
So the two or three things would be studying, but in
Yeah.
whichever way you feel like, and whichever subject you feel like initially.
Okay.
Because a schedule doesn't work, like I was saying before, that making a schedule with subjects and timings fixed is just like traditional schooling. So to find your rhythm and continue with the interest and discipline, it first takes a lot of indiscipline, and then over time, in fact, it didn't become a regular overnight. It took some time. And
Okay.
I can now, when I look back in time, I see phases. Those phases
Right.
keep changing, and then homeschooling becomes a way of life. it,
Right.
it is
Okay.
not it's not schedule based, it's not routine based, it's not it's yeah, yeah, it teaches you discipline with time.
Okay. Okay.
Yeah.
Anand, how would your week pass by, and what were those minimal things that would happen each day throughout the week?
I have to say, in some regards, Mega has covered a few things. The fact that even I imagined not, I mean, in hindsight, I can see that my homeschooling experience was divided in phases. My first year of homeschooling was very random. Was very chaotic, in the sense that I had no set schedule. I was trying to figure out what I should do with my time. I spent a lot of time, an almost inordinate amount of time, playing games and watching films, up to 3 hours, up to 5 hours every day, in fact. And and something good came out of that later on, but that I can only see what good came out of that in hindsight. But for the first year, it was very random, very chaotic. And eventually, what we did is, what my parents started to realize is that they would push things towards me that I would find, to find what I think is interesting. So we start sculpting. So my dad would get me a box, like a block of POP, and then I would try my hand at sculpting with we'd have a bunch of tools from a hardware shop. I'd have to go to the hardware shop. I'd learn how to select tools, what are the best tools, how do you choose a file, how do you choose a gouge, and then you'd craft. So things became very hands-on to find out where exactly do my interests lie, because at this point I did not know what I'm most interested in, and I had to force myself into this artificial curiosity, artificial questioning that schooling had sort of eroded for me. So that first year of transition was somewhat hard. I mean, it was as Megha said quite rightly, it was uncomfortable because you have so much time and you don't know what to do with yourself. But that partial space of 6 months or 1 year, it's crucial to figure out what you want for yourself, because at the end of the day, it's very rewarding. At the end of that year, it's very rewarding because you've finally done so many things at once. Now you know exactly what you want to do in the future. So from, as I said, from sculpting to making paper lanterns, that I would go to Daman, which is the UT nearby, and I would sell paper lanterns from door to door during Christmas time. Or as I said, I would sculpt and I would just do things. Or I got very interested in bone collection, so I'd start collecting bones by walking on riverbeds or walking on shores and trying to understand how they work. And essentially, when you have so much time with yourself, you can't help but question anything. And that discipline comes when you realize that you are so focused and you're so interested in something that you don't need anything else to structure your time for you. You automatically start organizing things around you.
I get
And
that.
yeah, that is what I would say.
Yeah, yeah. So, New, I think whenever we talk about homeschooling or when we are discussing this topic, a lot of the parents have two basic questions. The first one that is uh, because you're getting homeschooled, and of course, from whatever you share here, all three of you said, I'll take that up first. This effort requires a lot of dedication from your parents as well. So how much do you think? So if I have to take up this decision of homeschooling my child, I as a parent, I think I need to be geared up first, whether I am in it fully or not. So your views on that, Nero? Because it's a
I think
responsibility. I think if both the parents are working and if the parents are excited about the homeschooling bit, they might really have to squeeze in time and manage their own schedules to homeschool their child.
yeah, I think that deciding to homeschool is like deciding to become a parent, right? You can think about how you're excited about it, you can think about how you're worried about it, and so on. But the reality is, until you have that kid in your arms, you don't actually know what it's like to be a parent.
Right.
Right. So to some extent, honestly, anybody who starts homeschooling, no matter how prepared they are, is going to have a certain period of uncertainty and having to figure out what you're doing with this particular child. Because that's the thing, is that the traditional system, you can just say, oh well, children should be doing this and doing that. In homeschooling, you have to say, what does my child need? What is my child good at? What is my child struggling with? Right. And so I think the thing is, if the parents, I've
Hmm.
seen people homeschool a lot of different people. My parents do what's called parent assisted learning, right? And I've also helped people homeschool their children and make the decision on whether to homeschool. And honestly, what it comes down to is, are the parents passionate about doing that?
Hmm.
For whatever reason, whether it's because they feel the child is struggling in the school environment, or whether they say, okay, no, my kid's interests are specific and they need to be encouraged in a way that, if they spend 5 hours a day doing math homework, it's not going to help them with their dance career, right? And so on. It, whatever it is, that the main thing is that the parents are passionate, because then they will take the steps to discipline themselves, they will take the steps to educate themselves, whatever it is that is necessary to do it. And I mean, I see people are asking questions about how both parents are working and their children, how do you support your
Yeah.
children? What do you do when you're home? That's what it comes down to, right?
Right.
What do you do when my parents were working more than full time the whole time I was being homeschooled. They were running a school, which, I mean, God knows that that work does not end. People would start poking their heads through the window at 7 a.m. and it wouldn't end till 8:30 in the evening. There'd be somebody coming saying "Sat," and it is it they structured my schooling around their work and so on. And after a bit of thought, right, because what happens is, when you think of schooling your child, you always think, oh, in the morning you have to take a shower and then go sit down and school. And it doesn't necessarily have to look like that. And I think once you free yourself from that 9 to 5 mentality, you'll see you actually have a lot of time that you can spend with your children that maybe you're not thinking about.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
So, and the questions that I was mentioning, and I'd want probably all of you to give your inputs on that. Do you feel you've been homeschooled? Nero has been homeschooled throughout. Anant and Mega for at least 4 5 years or more. Do you feel that being homeschooled deprives you of developing certain social skills compared to if you're going to school? I mean, that's one question whenever we talk of homeschooling, that's one question that pops up in the top three questions, I should
Yeah.
say.
Yeah.
Yeah, who goes first?
I don't mind.
Yeah,
Okay.
yeah,
Um,
yeah, yeah, the-
honestly, I had so much time to play. I had more time to play than all my friends, because by the time, because generally what would happen is, during the flow of my day, when they had time to play, I'd be playing and then I'd go to class. So
okay,
honestly, I had so much time to hang out with people and do whatever. And the other important thing is, when you're homeschooling, right, you gain a lot of intergenerational interactional experience that isn't necessarily within that power structure of, I'm the teacher, I'm always right, we have no personal interactions, I will not answer any of your questions. Which is, I mean, even if individual teachers are more approachable and relatable than that, generally the school system doesn't allow you to talk to adults in a very one-to-one, direct, useful manner, right? So I
right,
think in that sense, actually, it prepares you to deal with a wider spectrum of people as an adult, which is good,
right,
because after you're out of school, there's no point in your life where somebody says, okay, now you're in a workplace, but you're the same age as Harish from marketing and Priya from finance, so all three of you have to sit on the same table. Nobody does that. It's always organized by interest, by work type, by everything else. So start doing that when the kid's young and they actually develop more healthy social skills.
right,
Yeah,
That's what I
I'd
think.
agree to that. Because, uh, especially the intergenerational. intergenerational interaction bit, because um, I think what people forget is that, of course, it's, I suppose, to some extent, it's necessary that you hang out with people of your own age, of your own age group. But I think in school you get too closeted, it's too blinkered, and you only hang out with people your own age, and you forget how to interact with people who not only share different opinions from you or who have learned different things from you, but who also have different life experiences simply because they're older or because they come from different backgrounds. School is too homogeneous. That is my fundamental problem with school. It's too homogeneous, and in homeschooling allows you to break all of that. So, I mean, in my case, what happened is because I have to travel so often to either have to go to Bombay for classes, or I think the same goes for me. I'd have to go travel to Bombay for my classical guitar classes. I would be traveling for unconferences and conferences. I'll be traveling for music fests to Calcutta, and traveling alone especially makes you realize that the world out there is much larger and that there are more people than can. And you have very strange interactions, which, as Neil pointed out, you don't stop. Those interactions don't suddenly start once you graduate from school or something. It always
Right.
existed, and started.
True.
So
True. Yeah. Megha, if you could share your view.
Yes. Like Anand said, traveling. I traveled a lot. I started going to Mumbai since I was young, and I think that also I used to travel for my classes while I was in school. I would go on weekends so that I don't miss my dance training. My mother used to come with me, and eventually that became part of life. So even in fact, after starting homeschooling, the number of days increased, and I would travel more, and eventually I traveled by myself. So the kind of social skills that you develop, and Anand has already spoken about it, while traveling, and then you spend a lot of time with a different group of dancers who are all of different age groups. That's what I meant.
Yeah.
And back home, in fact, even now when I look back, even in school, I had friends from all age groups, but I was not a very social person. So if you think about it, you find your social, what would you say, social circle however you
Connect.
are placed.
Yeah.
Connections, yes.
Yeah.
It doesn't matter, you don't have to be in school to be able to mingle with other classmates. You, if you want friends of your own age group, wherever you are living, you find friends. And that is true for all children right now. Even if children are home, they have different friends in their own buildings or colonies, and different friends in school. So
Right.
it's, I don't think it's an issue. It is not something that should hinder parents from taking a decision.
Right.
I'd
Right.
also
Right.
add one. I'd also like to add just one small thing, in especially a concern that a lot of students are homeschooling now, from homeschooling in the sense they're schooling at home during the pandemic. Is digital media has often allowed sort of extended whom we can interact with, and that's been true for a long time. But there's general reluctance to accept the fact that social media can have positive influences. But not just, I mean, ignoring the social media fact, I took a bunch of courses from Coursera. You can meet a bunch of people on the discussion forums. I eventually become a mentor for one of the courses on Coursera, and uh, things like that. Like, the digital platform is a massive platform, and even if you don't have physical interaction on those platforms, there are brilliant, excellent interactions that you can have across generations and across age groups that I think people will miss out, by naturally miss out if they are in school.
Right.
And that's true
Right.
for a pandemic time homeschooling, or that's true for natural homeschooling.
Sure, I'm sure. So, my next question is to Megha. Megha, while you were getting homeschooled, while this decision of being homeschooled was taken, were your relatives or friends skeptical about homeschooling, and people kind of told, "Oh, what are you getting into? Probably you should not be doing this." How did you handle? I mean, because you were almost in what, grade 9 and so on, and you were like a year before the boards. So how did that phase go on? How did you tackle that?
Okay, so first of all, I did not personally face any skepticism from people, because the friends and relatives that you mentioned, they've always known me as a person, and and so therefore they could relate to the decision that we have taken, that we took. So they were always curious, but never in doubt. And
Right.
to solve their curiosities, we'd have a nice chat, and they would be happy about the decision that we took. Yes, because
Was taken.
people would be curious about the whys and hows of
Right.
doing something like this, because it's a big change. So
Right.
yes, as to how to handle these things, I think it's a very personal journey for the child and the parents, and the
Mhm.
personal experience. It's a learning experience for everybody, not just the child. So
Right.
it should not really matter what people would think, because I say this because a lot of people think about the social constraints and
Stigma,
what
dogma.
will people think. Yes, that is a very big issue in a society like ours. So I don't think it should matter.
Sure.
Yeah.
I think I'm going to put this for Anant, and both of you can add on to this. Anant, what are the other activities apart from your guitar classes? And I'd put them as traditional activities, but apart from that, what are the things you did which you feel help you learn a lot? Like one you mentioned that you had some collection hobby, and then from that you got to learn a lot of things. So can you list one or two such things, activities that help you learn a lot, which are not kind of traditional activities?
Yeah, I so for instance, I began, as I said, the I'm an assistant writer for Studio Oleum on this, and that helped me start because I started reading a lot during my homeschooling. I began sort of adept at giving an output to all that reading in the form of writing, which meant that I had become somewhat decently adept at writing in certain styles in certain genres, and I was and when I started working with Studio Oleum as a designer, opportunity to write and
Have I lost Anant?
I
Are
think
you
we've
there?
lost Anand.
Yeah. I mean, I was a bit skeptical. I thought it's just my network, but then I think I better check. So by the time Anant is back, let's all of us. I mean, all of us are sounding for kind of too biased with the current school system and too pro towards homeschooling. So let's change the tone. All of you now tell me, what is it that that is being missed out when you're not going to school? Let's talk about that. I'm sure there's something that we miss out. I've been schooled. I've not been homeschooled. So let's be generous towards the schooling as well. What is it that you miss out when you don't go to school?
It's difficult for me to answer because my parents were running a school at the time that I was being homeschooled. So I actually did get to go to school for some subjects. So I had a foot in both uh, in both sides. And honestly,
Assume
what
you
I would
did
have
not
missed,
have that.
uh,
Assume you didn't have that. Assume you didn't have that.
honestly, what I would have missed is the idea of when you're genuinely interested in a subject and you have a friend who's also genuinely interested in the
Oh,
subject, the two of you getting together and sort of exploring or thinking
peer
about
to peer
that
learning.
kind of
Peer to peer
bonding.
learning.
You have to work hard. You can do it with a social group, but you
Yeah.
have to, it means a lot of working through groups and saying, okay, does anybody here fit me? Does anybody here fit me? There's that hide and seek that you don't have to do at school.
Right. 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 Mega.
I think my answer will disappoint you, Sohil, but I don't really miss anything. I'm being
Oh, there
very
has to be
honest here.
something. Come on, be generous.
No,
There
no,
has to be something.
I'm not being biased.
I mean, the
I
school
really,
picnic, picnic with your friends.
not really, because the
You can
kind
go
of
on a
trips
picnic
we
with
had
anybody.
after, exactly. I made friends after homeschooling. We still had picnics, we still had gatherings, and I would
Okay,
say much better. Yeah,
okay,
that was much better.
okay. I can see Anant has joined. Let me just add
Hey, Anand.
him back. Yeah, Anant, we have you back. Can you hear?
yeah, great.
Yeah. So
Yes.
we
Where
were
did
just
you lose me?
we went on a bit of different track that we are all sounding too biased with the existing school system. So I was just asking everyone, tell me something that you missed not going to school. What is it that you missed not going to school?
Uh, that's a tough one. I'm not sure. I'm not sure
Right.
what I.
Generous. Anand, that's what I told you.
I,
This is a bit due to the network. You have to be generous and tell us what did you miss about school. I mean,
I honestly don't think I'm.
cook up a story. Come on.
I could say that I missed a kind of as I said, there were only 5 students in our class, and we
Yeah,
had fairly close camaraderie with our teachers, some of our teachers. So I could say I
yeah.
missed some of my interactions with we had some younger teachers that would teach us languages, and we used to like hanging out with them. I guess that might be one thing I missed. But I mean, I would make up for it later on because I would still visit my school when I had the chance. So, but yeah, that or lab work. I have to say, I did miss lab work during going
Great,
to the
great.
chemistry lab or going to the physics lab, of course.
Yeah, see, there's so much there what you miss about school, and of course, there's a merit to school. I mean, I've been schooled. We talk a lot when we meet friends, school friends, and we say, "अरे school की कितनी याद आ रही है." We miss school so much. So, of course, there are some points that add on to the merit of going to school. Yes, Niru, I can see you want to kind of cut me off. Go ahead. You
No,
have
but
a
when
please.
when you what do you miss about school? But seriously, if I asked you if you woke up and you were 8 years old again, would you want to do everything the same?
So,
Because what
Nero,
you
tell me.
miss school or the friendships that you made in school? Because you can make friendships outside of school if you have time to be outside of school.
I
Yeah,
agree.
I'd
I
agree with
agree
that.
to that. But of course, I mean, I would still. I mean, the debate could go on longer on what what's good about schooling. But nevertheless, we are here to talk about the homeschooling experience. And my next question is to you, Niru. What's the difference? And of course, I mean, all of you can chip in and give your inputs. What's the difference between unschooling and homeschooling?
Uh, hmm. It, so it's a that's a definitional thing. Sometimes what I would say is that homeschooling can is unschooling is based on ideological opposition to the idea of traditional schooling, whereas homeschooling might look exactly like traditional schooling but in the home, right?
Yeah,
So it kind of it I guess it unschooling prioritizes being non-traditional. Homeschooling might prioritize that, might not. It depends on the sort of individual homeschooling parent
right.
and why they're homeschooling and how long they've been homeschooling, and those things factor in.
Anand, you want to add something on this
Yeah, I
debate?
mean, I would say, yeah, I agree with what Neeru said. Unschooling is more about sort of trouncing traditions in some ways. And I would go for so far as to say that I think in my initial years, I homeschooled. Before I decided that my interest lay in academia, I decided I was going to unschool. And it's only when I decided that I realized that my interest lay in very academic fields like archaeology or philosophy that I thought that, okay, perhaps it's time for me to take in somewhat institutional help in the form of universities, for which I'd like to get my boards. And at which point I started homeschooling, if I could say that. But I think unschooling is, I mean, I recommend that everyone go through a phase of unschooling if for nothing, but that unschooling presents with you a choice of whether you want to continue pursuing homeschooling or unschooling or mainstream schooling. I think what people forget is if you're going in mainstream education is not a choice. It's a fairly goal-oriented, teleological approach towards something that it has an ultimate, like you have to go through. If you're in mainstream schooling, then you have to go through university and then you have to get a job. And once you start unschooling, you realize that, oh, that's a choice. So I could make a conscious decision that I want to get back into academia. Not a lot of people have that choice, or they don't realize that that is a choice in the first place. So I think that is where unschooling and homeschooling lies.
So,
And yeah, I agree. Homeschooling is more structured, formal, curriculum-based
yeah.
schooling, but it just happens at home.
Okay, okay. So, this is for you, Mega. Uh, you appeared your 10th from NIOS, if I'm not wrong.
That's right.
Okay. So, how did your boards and your preparation go on? I also see comments coming in from the audience asking that, okay, if you homeschool, what about the exams? What about the tests? So, if y'all could put some light on this, how did you prepare for your boards?
How did I prepare for my boards?
Yeah, grade 10.
Uh, Grade 10. Okay.
Yeah.
So I took some time off, and I wouldn't say took some time off from studying, but that space wherein you make that transition, and I would call it partial unschooling, because for
Mhm.
me unschooling was just unlearning the methods that I was using to study earlier. And during that space, when I started asking questions, and I realized that there can be a different approach to academics, making these connections to better understand certain subjects, and altogether that
Okay.
you don't even need to dedicate separate time to understand certain topics because they are interrelated. These are the things that my personal unschooling consisted of. And after that, I kind of, like Anand said, it's a choice, but he spoke on a much advanced level when it comes to the different transitions from school to university to job. I made that transition and that balance between my traditional way of studying and studying for my boards
Hmm.
after taking some time off and deciding how I want to go about it. So the approach definitely changed, but the kind of exams I appeared for were very similar to what a CBSE exam would look like. But the way I prepared for it changed.
Was different.
Yes,
Right.
because I had a lot of time. Yeah.
Got it. Yeah. So, Nero, help parents who are listening to us understand that, and you mentioned that you helped a lot of other people get started with their journey of homeschooling their kids.
Mhm.
So, can you kind of list down or just spell out that if, as a parent, you are planning to have your child homeschooled, what's a good way to look at this whole process and how can you get started? Or what is it that you should accept first before you get started with this journey?
Um, it is first that it is a second full-time job. One
Yeah.
parent cannot do it by themselves. Both parents have to be invested. Even if only one parent is doing the teaching, the other parent does have to pick up the slack in terms of dealing with family, dealing with housework, dealing with things like that. Whichever parent was, and I was very lucky in that my father is a very, walk the walk feminist, right? When my mom was teaching, he'd clean. When my dad was teaching, mom would cook. So, everything got done, but it was very much a team effort. This is
Right.
the first thing. You need to have both of you need to be on board and willing to go with it
Right.
genuinely, deeply. The second thing is don't, the longer you wait, the
Mhm.
longer, the more difficult it becomes to start homeschooling.
Okay.
Between the thought of thinking of homeschooling and starting homeschooling, right? If you say, okay, I'm going to homeschool 3 years from now, then in 3 years, you'll find, oh my God, everything has changed, right?
Yes.
Um, the other thing is that you are absolutely going to be working with your child's particular needs, right?
Right.
So your child is not going to be some sort of perfect student right off the bat just because, oh well, now mommy's teaching me, so I'm going to be an angel. It's not going to be like that, right?
Right.
I mean, even my parents faced a lot of challenges. I'm not very neurotypical. I see someone here asking about, can homeschooling help ADD ADHD children. I am the
Yeah.
poster child for ADD, and I had a wonderful time learning how to organize myself and be very sort of methodical and
Right.
disciplined, because generally what happens is that ADD children work in a very structured environment where they're already struggling, then they become adults and now they don't even have that external structure and they struggle a lot to organize themselves because nobody has sat them down and taught them how.
Right.
Whereas my mother very much would, when she saw me getting disorganized, would say, okay, now think about how much homework you have to do over the next 3 weeks.
Right.
Now, is it realistic that you want to spend 2 weeks doing nothing but reading books, or should you be trying to do 1 or 2 hours of homework a day? And I'd say, okay, yeah, you know what, that makes sense now that you put it that way.
Right.
So, and that's the thing, you have to work with the child that is in front of you and address the child that the whole human being that your child is. And so, it's very much for people who have a holistic view of of parenting.
Right.
That's those are the sort of preconditions. For the rest, get support groups. There's so many people on the internet. There's so many other people who are homeschooling. My parents reach out to a lot of different people who need help with homeschooling their children. um, they kind of do that semi-professionally, in fact, in terms of how much of their professional time is taken up by it. So, and I mean, I'm also available.
Sure, sure. I get that. So, Mega, if you were allowed to start a school, I'm not asking this on purpose to Nero. She's got it quite hands-on with this answer, so I'm kind of leaving the other questions to her. I'm coming to you, Mega, and the question is: if you're allowed to start a school, okay, and then what would have been those changes that you would want to make based on your experience of getting homeschooled? Just tell me two or three quick changes that you would want to have in your own school.
Okay, so first of all, since we have already established that I am a little biased, I think I am the wrong person to talk about this. This is a very
No,
vast topic.
what
Also,
would you
no,
have? I would put it the other way around. You starting a school, and what would you do based on your homeschool experience?
so schooling is about teaching, and homeschooling is all about learning. I think they are both interdependent, but to me personally, they are two very contradictory processes. Okay,
Right.
so I really wouldn't want to talk about opening a school myself, being a homeschooler. But I think since you insist on certain points,
Imagine,
uh,
imagine.
uh, um, I think the first and foremost would be pace. Okay, so pace is something that is one of the most important aspects that people neglect. That when you gather a bunch of students and put them in a classroom and you expect everybody to learn a particular topic in a particular given time.
Time,
Okay, everybody has different coping mechanisms, and not
right?
that is a very wrong expectation to have. That is one. And there's been a lot of talk about how every child is unique and all those things, and I think a lot of stress should actually be given to these ideas.
Right.
Second would be the entire result oriented psychology. Is also a very it's a very pressurizing idea for parents as well as students. Okay,
Right.
and it comes directly to students from the school and indirectly from parents because of the system.
Yeah.
So this the journey is more important. What you do to achieve something, the achievement is not important. You don't I mean, according to me, you don't set a goal and then
Right.
you constantly keep pressurizing yourself to achieve that goal. It's
Mhm.
about having something in mind, pursuing it, finding your time and pace, and then achieving it instead of thinking about the results. So of course, it is I am actually talking about examinations. This need not be time bound. I'm not against examinations, but the kind of pressure that it creates.
I agree. Yeah, in one of these webinars that we were doing, we mentioned about a similar example that Kalpana Chaudhary ma'am was on the panel, and she
Hmm.
mentioned that there was a child who was not able to write, and was deemed as the child does not know things. And when the child was asked the question, he was able to answer in a very good way. The only problem was he was not able to write. So the only form of assessment which is being, the written exams,
Hmm.
put that child in a category of probably he is not understood or he does not know a certain topic, whereas he knows but he's not able to write. So I think assessment. Let me also tell you, Mega, all these 3 points that you're saying, you sound too much like an academician. So you have some depth of understanding through the process that you've been through, and that's given you this insight. I talk to a lot of schools,
Definitely.
I do a lot of teachers training, and we talk all these things. We put emphasis on this, that the child should be given this freedom to learn on his own pace. Just before I come to you, Anand, I have a question for Niru. Niru, tell me what would you want to tell the teachers? So we cannot just go and tell, everyone that let's start homeschooling, but teachers who are there, who are handling kids day in and day out, of course, leave the COVID situation aside for now. But what good can the teachers do from your experience of homeschooling? What should a teacher be doing in the classroom to make this journey, like Megha mentioned, a more enjoyable journey for the child?
Um, I think it's difficult for teachers within a traditional schooling environment to make learning enjoyable. Not because the teachers are ill prepared. It's not even really the teacher's fault. It's the system's fault. In that it makes it very as Megha said, everything's so results oriented, right? If it doesn't matter if the kids love the teacher and the kids learn well from the teacher, if the teacher doesn't, if they don't quote unquote do well on the exams, the teacher is deemed a bad one, right? Even if it's not a question of ability or passion. So for a teacher, what I would say is remember that you're actually every single person in front of you is a full realized in a human being with interiority, right? I think that the system reduces children to numbers. What numbers they get on their exam, what number they are in their roll call, what number they what number they got on their last test. And I think that it's easy to fall into that pattern because that's what gets you results. But ultimately, and people always talk about, oh well, the teachers have to prepare children for the rat race, and I'm like, you're not raising rats. You're raising human beings, you're raising future citizens, and that's I mean, keeping that in mind at every moment will definitely change the way you teach.
Right, right, right. So, Anant, tell me, do you think or do you feel that homeschooling? We already talked about. You mentioned that peer-to-peer learning is something that you can say that is not happening while in the homeschool. But do you also think that also, which is a contrast to the point which Megha mentioned, do you think that lack of competition with peers makes a homeschooled child a bit less ambitious by any ways?
Oh
Yeah.
dear.
Are you there, Anant? No, I think the audio is not there. So I'll drive that question to you, Nero, if you could answer that.
Actually, I think it makes, if anything, it makes you more ambitious because it extends your ambitions past the next board exam. Right. I think a
Okay.
lot of kids are not really allowed to develop personal ambitions because there's these societally determined ambitions that they have to have. And
Right.
by the time, I mean, you can either prepare for your 10th or translate a novel. This is basically what happened to me. This was what my time came down to. And I said, I want to translate a novel. And
Right.
I worked hard on that. I was doing, by the end, I was putting in 10, 11-hour days just because, I mean, my parents had to drag me away from the computer to
Before or at what age were you doing this, Nero?
at 15.
Okay.
Right. So what I told them is I'll take my 12th, I'll do my A levels. Just give me this 1 year. I want to translate. I don't want to do anything. I
Okay.
don't want to do anything else. So, I mean, I was putting in a work week, like an office job work week on just on that translation on top of my other schooling. Right.
Right.
And I think that's an incredibly ambitious thing for a 15-year-old to do, but it's not something that the system allows. And so I think it changes what ambition means to you because it becomes about doing something that you personally are passionate about and invested in and talented at, instead
Right.
of spending 1/5 of my time worrying about what my math score was going to be.
Right. Makes
If I didn't
sense.
have trigonometry related ambitions, I would have just gone to sleep and never woken up.
That makes sense. Mega, and of course, I'll be asking this to Niru and maybe if Anand is joining us again. The question is that we are in a situation where everyone is at home. Kids are forced to be at home. Mega, what would you want to tell these kids who are at home? On one hand, the parents are getting worried. On the other hand, the school is trying all that comes in their way to get in touch with these kids and engage them in some or the other form. Uh, Through what you've been through in your journey of homeschooling, it's been like what, 4 months now. The kids have been at home. Travel is not an option. Going out a lot is not an option. Tell us, or tell all the parents, what's your message for the students who are at home? What should they do? What are the few things that you suggest should happen now?
uh, the first thing that I would suggest is they should ask questions, as many questions as they can, while studying, while not studying, while pursuing anything else of their interest. And because it is these questions that will encourage them to learn independently. I know currently we are all aware that school sessions have begun and tuitions are happening online, everything is happening online, but it's happening in the same way.
Yeah,
Okay, just as it
the
used to happen.
physical
We are
classroom
learning
has just
the
gone
typical,
virtual.
yes, exactly, it's virtual. That's the only difference. So I think everybody thinks it's a very temporary situation, and once we get back to it, everything will be on track, and that when we will cover things up. Parents are, at the same time, parents are insecure that you should start covering up now, because otherwise
Yeah,
you lose on a lot of syllabus
marks,
and stuff.
your exams.
Exams, exactly. This brings me to the question that you asked me earlier when I was preparing for my boards. What did I do? And I
Yeah.
spoke of a little bit about homeschooling, unschooling. I'm sorry. I also would like to say that when I started questioning things, and then when I used to seek help for any subject or any topic that I didn't understand properly, I
Mhm.
was probably studying the same syllabus,
Okay.
and the teacher, that the resource person that helped me out, was also teaching a
Mhm.
bunch of other tuition kids. But
Okay.
both our approach changed. My
Right.
approach changed, the way I would question a particular topic, and her approach of teaching me would also change. So
Right.
it's not like you need to close your textbooks and completely change your ways of looking at things. But if with the same subjects and topics that you are studying in school, I mean in the virtual school and tuitions, if you start taking it more seriously, in sense of the approach and the method in which you learn, I think that will really help them. Because we hear a lot of kids say that they are depressed with so much studying and so much virtual learning, and also the so called extracurricular activities. To that I would also like to say that by calling them extracurricular activities, we are already, there's a very underlying negative feeling to it, that they are supposed to be extra. Okay, apart from academics, they are not supposed to be pursued, I mean, with equal importance. I'm not saying this because I'm a musician, but because I have experienced what the balance and the fusion of everything together feels like. So the moment you start taking those activities, be it music, dance, art, karate, yoga, or any of those classes, the moment you start making that part of your daily life and stop treating it
Mhm.
as a hobby, you start seeing the importance, the depth of these
Right.
serious art forms or sport forms. And
Right.
so this is something that this kind of thinking is something that parents should also develop, so that their
Sure.
attitude towards pursuing anything would change. And there would be a
Sure.
more, yes, the another thing that I would like to add to this is to not make comparisons. This is for students, in sense of the portion covered with their peers, because they are not physically with their peers. So
Right.
set goals for themselves, small deadlines, and just work on it. Try to gain more knowledge
Sure.
of a particular topic that they are interested in, and connect, try and connect everything that they can for a better learning experience.
Sure.
Yeah.
So, Anand, we have you, and I want to have some inputs from you on this. We were discussing about what would you want to tell parents and kids who are homebound and kids who've not been able to attend school for a couple of months, what is it that they should be focused on considering the social distancing and stay at home situation? What is it that kids should be doing?
Well, I would say everyone should take this time to figure out where their interests really lie, and they can do
Mhm.
this in multiple ways using not just, I don't just mean online courses or something like
Yeah.
that, but I think social media in general. There are a lot of webinars, there are a lot of interesting talks on online. There are a whole bunch of resources that people can access. There are audiobooks that are for free. There are plays on YouTube that are now being streamed for free for weeks. I think people should take this time to do things they would not otherwise have been able to do in school. Watching
Right.
plays for 3 hours a day is not something people are allowed to do at school. So if they have time right now to do that, since they're at home, they definitely should take that. So there are a bunch of research, not just audiobooks. There are research papers available that were not available before. There are films that are now streaming online for free that could not have been before.
Yeah.
Um, just things that you would not have thought were possible to do at school. And this might just also be something like exploring video games that you have not seen before, that have not played before, games that make you actively uncomfortable, or games that or reading books that you would not have picked up before.
Right.
All of this will, in the long run, this definitely helps. I'd say
Sure.
that.
Yeah. Nero, what message do you have? We are nearing the end of our discussion, and I'm sure everyone understands that all of you had a great journey of homeschooling. And before we just go to our last question and inputs from you, what is your input, Nero, for the parents and students who are homebound?
Pardon me? For what?
For the parents and students who are homebound now due to
Oh,
this current situation?
yeah, sorry, it cut out for a second for me.
Yeah.
What I would say is, both for parents and for teachers who are talking to, who are dealing with this situation, right? What might benefit you right now is having a sort of concrete methodology that you can work with. Like for example, the methodology my parents came up with, which is called QuadSeek, is it's aimed at creating individualized but organized curriculum planning and sort of helping children progress through various stages of schooling in a very individualized way, right?
Yeah.
Another thing that could help is right now, I mean, the nice thing is we have the internet. It makes life so much easier. I can't
Yeah.
imagine how much it would have saved my parents time and headache if they'd had it when I was 5 and 4 and 3 years old. Museums are currently offering free tours. There are online courses you can take. uh, just the sheer quantity of resources if you just start looking, right?
Yeah.
And like I said, there's also a really thriving community of homeschoolers online and
Yeah.
homeschooling parents online. And I think, parents like ours have a lot of wisdom to offer people who are even temporarily homebound right now. It can be a time of such great personal growth and reconnection with your kid. And I think rather than being worried, be happy. Don't worry about it. I just talked about how I skipped my 10th to translate a novel. I wound up doing my A levels in my 12th standard, and it was fine.
Yeah.
We overstress the importance of every single year. Most children are so resilient, they won't even notice if they don't do their 10th, as long as what they need in the 10th is covered in the 11th, right? And most schooling paths also really, who walks up to somebody with a master's and says, so what was your 10th standard score? Well, you weren't good at geometry.
Yeah.
Bad, no? Nobody does that. Nobody cares. There's this, and so, to these parents, I say, just relax. Get to know your child. Get to encourage your child to develop interests and ambitions that are theirs, not just what that rat race tells you you need to have.
Yeah. Perfectly makes sense. I think that summarizes what we have to talk today. And before we end the session, I would like to have all of you to share with us what are your current and future plans? What do you intend to do?
Hmm.
Yeah, I think Anand, take a go ahead
Do you
on
mean
this.
Yeah.
do you mean in a sort of philosophical existential manner, or do you mean in a very pragmatic manner?
Uh, mm,
Because I could give you a long answer for both. But no, I think if by in practical terms you're asking, well, what is next. Um, I mean, I'm already a student in a university, and as I said, I'm studying at another university, and I'll have myself as soon as the semester starts, I'll be back into a university life, so to speak. Until then, I'm utilizing this time to catch up on uh, uh, there's a lot of interdisciplinariness that surrounds the subjects that I'm already studying, and the subjects that I'm studying include philosophy, history, and languages. So there's a lot that I don't get to study. There's a lot I don't get to catch up on during the university simply because my interdisciplinary connections are focused elsewhere. Now I'm trying to cover up on other kinds of interdisciplinary connections. So I'm reading books that have to do with, I don't know, machine learning, reading on books that have to do with programming, and collecting that to philosophy. Things that I will eventually cover, perhaps I eventually want to explore in academia. That is what I'm trying to focus on right now, and that is what I'll focus on for the next month before the semester begins.
great.
And
Yeah,
catching
Mega.
up on all the other video games, of course.
Right. Yes, Mega.
That's part of my life.
Um, Currently, I am spending a lot of time with my craft, with practicing,
Okay.
basically, because most of my day goes into practicing. There are very different aspects of a particular art form to which you
Right.
can relate to and connect with another art form. So that has been my focus for quite some time now, and there are a few projects that I have in mind, and I wish
Okay.
to take those things up.
Great. Yes, Niru.
And for me, I right now I'm kind of in a mid zone because with the pandemic everything's very uncertain. I spent
Okay.
the last 4 years working in an adult literacy program, and I think I'd like to continue working in sort of post secondary administration, learner support services, and that kind of thing. Um, and I do plan to go on to my master's maybe in 1 or 2 years. I'm just trying to. In the meantime, I've spent quarantine doing intensive writing exercises to try and level up my writing. I want to do more original novel kind of writing as well.
Great, great. So, good luck to all of you. And I can tell you that being in the education domain, working with teachers and schools, seeing both the sides, visiting a lot of schools, alternate schools, and knowing the quad seek methodology quite closely, I feel amazing about your journeys and the way you all have stood up and whatever you're doing now. I'm going to quickly pop up a question on the screen. Any one of you could quickly try and answer this one, though we've covered a bit of this in the talk that we've done in the last almost 60 minutes now. So, if any one of you could please answer this. Brinda Shah is asking, should we worry about them missing out on an entire range of subjects that they could miss out on, assuming they're too young to decide subjects? So, as a parent, should a parent be worried about the subjects that the child is missing out on?
I think as a parent, it sort of becomes a duty to figure out what kind of subjects the child is interested in learning in the first place, and then just go on from there. I mean, there are certain things that people believe that are required to learn as a foundational basis. So everyone needs to know a little bit of arithmetic. That's what people believe, that everyone needs to know a little bit of geometry or a little bit of physics. I have to say that a lot of that is covered naturally. There's a lot of this; these are natural interests in a child. A child never misses out on anything, or he never feels like he misses out on anything as long as he's given time to explore the subjects that he wants to explore. And in doing that, he'll automatically cover a bunch of subjects that he never thought he would explore or she would explore. And so I don't think that fear of missing out on a range of subjects is a legitimate fear. I mean, you could the kind of things that you study at school, you can. I mean, if you're studying a range of subjects at school, you might miss out on a different kind of subjects, and if you study doing homeschooling, you might miss out on a different kind of subjects. So
Yeah,
you'll always have some kind of lacuna. You'll always have some kind of blind spot. So
yeah. Good. Thank you, everyone, for all your inputs. I think this gives in insights to parents who probably are evaluating options of homeschooling or probably making their home time, their child's home time, more meaningful. I think we leave such parents and individuals with some food for thought and help them delve much more into the topic, understand this in a better way. Of course, we do break a lot of myths like what happens to my child's social development, what happens to the day to day schedules, and also what happens to the independence that a child should gain. We've talked about all these points, and I'm sure this is going to trigger some form of actionables to a lot of parents and teachers, of course. Of course, like all of you mentioned, we are all approachable. It's a small world. We're there to help with more inputs for people interested. People around Vapi and Gujarat, Quadseek Lumen School runs much on this philosophy of unschooling and giving more emphasis on the right things rather than running behind marks or anything of that sort, which we said that is a demerit in the existing school system. So, looking forward to learn more in times to come and have more inputs. But for today, we call it a session. We end this here. Thank you, everyone, for being present here
Thank you.
and sharing your life journey and your homeschool journey with everyone here. Thank you, Megha, Niru, and Anand, for
Thank
your
you.
inputs.
Thank you.
thank you for having us.
Yeah.
Thanks.